I hope to be joined later on by Damien Coleman, Development Hurling Manager up in Connacht, and Kevin Kelly from Ulster might pop in as well. So, folks, we'll start away, and recommendations really for coaching children. Looking at the practical elements is what the focus is on tonight. So quite a few of you have been on some of the workshops already, and there'll be a certain amount, I suppose, of overlapping, but that's par for the course. So, you know, hopefully we'll be getting out in the field sooner than later, and you're probably wondering now, you know, what would we recommend that you do? So look at, no matter what team you're coaching, whether it's under sixes or it's inter-county senior, it all boils back to what we have called the Magnificent Seven, otherwise known as the basics, skills. The word basic doesn't do them justice really, so we call them the essentials. So in no particular order: rising and catching, hooking and blocking, striking and hand passing, and of course the first touch. So if you work on those and you work on them in detail, you're not going to go too far wrong. You think about them, you know, they're just a few simple words, but if, for example, you leave out any one of those areas, well, you're like a golfer going out without a putter or without a driver. You're leaving a gap in your player's development, and you know that just doesn't make any sense. So, you know, how do I go about coaching? Let's say you're pretty new to it, and I'm wary that some of you have loads of experience looking in tonight, and some of you, it could be the first time you're taking over your under 10 team, and you're wondering, how should I go about it? What should I do? How long might a training session last? How many players are involved in the session or in various parts of the session? These are all some of those little questions that do crop up. So I think to begin with, it makes a lot of sense to plan your coaching. Now, depending on the team, needless to say, if you're looking after the under sixes, you probably don't need a huge amount of planning, to be honest about it. But if you're looking after maybe an under 14 team and you have designs on maybe winning the championship, well, you probably put a little bit more into it. But either way, even if it is the under sixes, it does make sense to maybe have a look at the season and ask yourself, well, in a normal year, when are we starting? How many evenings a week are we going to train? What are our training sessions going to look like? How many challenge games are we going to get? How many championship games, if any? How many blitzes are we going to? And then you break it down bit by bit into weeks and then into each night. And it is very, very important to know what you're going to do on a given night in a session. That is hugely important. You know, if you go down to the field and you're not prepared, you're running the risk of the session falling apart. And players pick up on that very, very quickly. So, you know, to be organised, to know what you're going to do, have everything ready to go so that there's no time wasted in between, let's say, drills or skills or whatever you're doing. I would always put my sessions on a little card. As much for myself, you know, really, I probably know what I'm going to do, but to have it written down there and maybe have it timed, that helps, because I find it's very easy to lose track of time when you're getting to a session. It's very easy to think something has gone well and I'll stick at it, and suddenly the night is gone. And even sometimes I'll get one of my colleagues to watch the time for me, because I'm notorious for starting something that I might have planned for 10 minutes. And, you know, because it's going well, or maybe because it's not going well, suddenly there's 15 minutes gone. What I would suggest is, if you're playing a game, and I'd suggest that you do strongly, we'll come to that again, that you write down maybe in the back of your hand what time the game starts. Now, if you're playing the game first, well, that solves that problem straight away. And we might mention that in a while as well. But If you're not playing the game first, it's very, very important that, let's say you're training from 7 till 8 o'clock and you plan to start the game at 7:30. You don't want to find yourself in the middle of the drills at 7:45 and suddenly realize, oh, there's only 15 minutes left. So that's important. Now, equally so, to allocate X amount of time to each skill, each drill that you're doing, that makes sense. So the little the little card you're looking at there was a session that I had to do there last year. And I had 2 different groups. I was starting off with the under 8s, and then I had to do a little session with under 12s stroke under 14s. Now, it was really a coach to coaches session. That's what it was really for. But needless to say, we just trained the children anyway. So my under 8 session, I decided, and I didn't know the ability going up. I didn't know what the players were like. So my approach to it was I'd use a stations approach to the under 8 session. And I picked out 6 little stations. And that in itself was a great help, because it gave me the opportunity to involve the coaches, and it gave me the opportunity to involve people that didn't realize that they were going to be coaches. There were parents that were there watching after bringing their children, and I very quickly got them involved. And the stations approach helps you to do that. So the first little station was simply chasing, a little game of tig or whatever you might call it. And you might say to yourself, what was that for? Well, it was for a bit of fun to begin with, but it was also then to work on footwork. And footwork is hugely important in all sport. It was most certainly important in hurling and camogie. So a little game of chase there, whatever, if we had groups of 5 or 6 children, 1 or 2 would be on and they'd be chasing the rest. And, we just made sure that you change the chaser every minute or so. It doesn't matter. The second station then was on tires. Next one then was rising and soloing. And I put down a little note there, bean bags. I brought along a few bean bags just in case the children weren't able to solo. So by using the bean bags, it meant they could all manage it. And then I was striking in 2s. Now again, depending on the ability, it was going to be probably striking on the ground. And I made a little set of goals, and one opposite one was the setup, one opposite one, 2 little cones as goals, and away they went. Station 5 was a dribble, and I might have finished up with a little strike. And station 6 was working on the pole trainers, which we'll see in a while. So that was the first half an hour, and the second half an hour then was little games. So the under 14s then moved on to them later on. And the first job I had with them was striking in 2s. And I had that divided up into 3 little sections. First one was striking to the hand, and I was hoping they were able to do it. Well, if they weren't, we just worked away on the ground. The second 5 minutes was all on the ground. And the third 5 minutes was striking in 3s, where I just put them into 3s and told them, run all over the field, lads and girls, and just start striking ball to each other, at as far away from each other as you can. So if they could only strike 20 metres, they were 20 metres apart. If they could strike 40, they were 40 metres apart. If they could strike 60, they were 60. Second little exercise then for them, and they were all doing it together, was rising in 3s. So little lines of 3, 1 opposite 2, and a person, one child just ran, rise the ball, leave it down, go behind the other child, and away you went. And third little exercise then was hand passing, moving around the field, hand passing. So I was given kind of 5 minutes for each of those, and then moved into the games. Okay, so that was kind of a little simple plan. Now, what I would recommend to you is always, before you bring your session to the field, look at it from a player's perspective. Imagine you're a player, or if you have a son or a daughter going down to the field, maybe let them have a look at it and say, how does this look to you? That it won't be saying, oh God, he's going to be doing drills all night. There's no game down there. That wouldn't be good. At the end of the day, it's all about the game. But in order to play the game, we need to learn the skills. So it's about getting a little bit of balance. Now, that's just another collection of some of my sessions, and I'd have dozens of them, literally. The advantage is, it gives me a little bit of confidence going to the field. I'd always write down maybe a little bit extra just in case something is not working out well and I need to substitute something else for it. It's very handy if you're under pressure some night and you hadn't time to plan the session, that you can pick up a card and away you go. The ones in the middle have just a little bit more than the session. They have maybe a pitch layout. If I was doing, which I regularly do the same things, and I wanted to plan my field for maybe 30 players and didn't want to be wasting time wondering, can I fit so many here and so many there? So I draw out how the field is going to look and where different activities are taking place, and I'd laminate them. So it means I have them for the last 20 years. So that's quite handy. Another advantage there is you can look back at your cards and you can see after a couple of weeks what you have done, or more importantly, what you haven't done. So they're all just a few ideas that are probably worth doing. Now, people often ask, how does a standard training session look? Well, it looks like whatever way you want it to look. That's basically how it looks. I'd broadly be working on half and half the time skill development, half the time games. And as you see, the maths is not too good with me, but that doesn't really matter. It's going to be determined then by how many players you have, how you're going to organise it then, and how long each aspect of the training is going to take. So again, as you see there, the 20 minutes on skill development, a couple of different skills tonight, and the games part of it, I have a mixture. And it might be a mixture on some nights, and it might not be a mixture. So with children, I probably always nearly play a little bit of one-to-one. And that again can be striking off the ground, it can be striking off the hand, it's a little match. 3 goals and in is a lovely little game, and there's plenty of activity. The smaller the numbers, the more activity they get, and that's important, especially for your younger children. So if you have 3 goals and in, you divide your children into 3s of reasonably equal ability and make little goals with cones or poles if you have them. And one player goes into goals and pucks out the ball, and the other 2 compete. Simple as that. Every time there's a goal, you puck out another ball. And I might leave that game go maybe for a minute and a half or 2 minutes and then change the goalie. Go for another 2 minutes and change the goalie. So you can do all kinds of games with that. It can be all on the ground. It can involve rising if you wish. If you have stronger players and you want to work on something in particular, like high catching, every puck out could be a high ball. If you want to work on taking on a player, you could puck the ball, every puck out goes long, and the players in turn pick it up and come running at their opponent. So there are lots of little varieties that you can bring in there. Little game of 5v5 is very good. A goalie and 4 outfield players across the pitch. Now, even for adults, I put a lot of sim into that. 5v5. 3 games if I have 30 players. I have 3 little games where there are 10 players, 5 versus 5 across the pitch, which is normally about 80 to 90 meters. So there's a lot of activity can be got out of that. And then maybe a full game with older players. I'd be going into maybe a fair bit of full-sided game, 15 aside if I have the numbers. If I just have 20, I'll go 10 aside. With the younger players, I would keep it all to lower numbers. I wouldn't be going into 15 aside for under 10s because they won't be playing it anyway. And just bearing in mind, if you're looking after maybe under 14s and you have 20 players, what I always like to do is I want to give them experience of using the full length of the pitch, and I also want to give them experience of using the full width. So on one night, I might put down a line of cones, maybe 15 meters in from each sideline. In other words, I'll take off a third of the pitch. And a pitch being maximum 90 meters, so a third of it is 30 meters. So if I bring in the cones 15 meters each side and we go full length, well then that 20 players, they have the same amount of space as they would have on a full pitch 15 aside. And they're getting full length, so they're able to open the shoulders and drive the ball long, which is something I emphasize a lot. On another occasion, it might be a different night, or it might be half of the game the same night, I'll go full width, but I shorten the pitch. Again, if we have just 20 players. So I might put a set of poles, maybe 40 meters out from the lower end line. So My players then are lined out, 3 on the full back line, 3 on the half back line, and the same with the forwards, and depending on a number of midfielders we have. So the players playing down the field, once they come to the poles, that's the end of their pitch to just shoot for points. Players playing up the field, it's normal. And obviously I'd swap them around at half time. So something like that is worth considering. Now, it is important to plan your pitch. Again, you know, you don't want to be wasting time moving cones around in the middle of your training session. Before you go down, you have an idea how many players are likely to come. Have a good idea exactly what you want to do. And if you can do things in different areas, it's a great help. You know, if you can start up at the top corner, then move on to the next spot, and then move down to the middle of the field without having to pick up and put down cones, that helps the session to move smoothly. Now, if you can't, you can't. And that's where the help comes in. And this is a great way of involving new coaches. It's a great way of mentoring a few of your friends, that they're helping you. If you're the experienced coach, they're getting involved with you there, they're helping you. And, you know, you've worked it a few nights and you say, okay, you do such a thing tonight and I'll do it the next night, and we swap around. So that makes sense, planning your pitch. Now, in advance of tonight, we asked you to have a look at a little video, at a little set of videos that we put together there, about 35 skills, drills, whatever you want to call them. It's great if you did get a chance to look at them. If you didn't, don't worry, we'll be showing a few of them tonight anyway. And the reason we asked you to look at them in advance is on these Teams meetings, the video doesn't always travel so well. While it might look perfect for me here at my own computer, it can be very, very frosty or slow depending on your internet speed, or even it's nothing to do with internet speed. Some nights they just don't travel. But anyhow, when we put those videos together, we did them up at St. Vincent's in Dublin. And needless to say, we were working with about in excess of 60 children, girls and boys. So we had to be organised, needless to say. You're putting a video together, and I can send out what you're looking at there to you. I can send out a little list of skills as well that might be useful for you. But just very, very broadly, we had 6 groups. We started off with the girls, and we had 6 groups. That's G1 to G6 there that you're looking at. And we might have had 5 or 6 girls in each group. So they were doing the little skills in yellow. First one was Zorro, little sword fighting. Then the next group were doing swinging. The next group were working on tires, and so on. And, you know, that's kind of like a station based on in our situation. They were all doing the same thing at the same time, but we were just videoing one group at a time. But, you know, that would be an example of stations where you might put 5 or 6 children, or 3 or 4, depending on what station, what you're working on, and you'd rotate them after whatever you decide, 3 or 4 minutes. Now, prior to going on to the little drills, we had the small games, and the girls were doing those at the very beginning. So straight away, we went into the pitch, and there was plenty of room, and we played our little mini games there on the near side of the pitch. And when they were done, we rambled across then, and they all went into their groups. And we commissioned loads of parents to help out, and they were delighted. And some of them are in the videos, and they never coached before, but they're now coaches. So when the girls were finished, then the boys came in, and they were in green. So again, parents had them organised in whatever kind of groups we asked them to organise, groups of 6, I think, and they knew where they were heading for, and off we went. So that was kind of nice and handy to have your little pitch laid out in advance. Now, the next question is probably going to be what to coach. Okay. Well, it all comes down to drills and skills and games, really. And the game, by far, the most important. And everybody loves a game, and that's why we play. We play to play a game. We don't come down to do skills and drills the whole night. However, you cannot play the game without the skills. And how do you learn skills? Through drills. And even though, you know, coaching over the years ago, it was all a game, because you only had 1 slitter or 2 or 3 slitters anyway, so you had no choice. There was no such thing as a ball between two or a ball each. That didn't exist. And cones didn't exist either. And then as the years went on, I suppose slitters became more available and cones were invented. And suddenly coaching was all about having a pile of drills. And then some people thought that that was gone crazy, and it was in some cases. And some people kicked a bit against the skills and the drills in and says, no, now we're all back to games-based approach to training. So look at, it's all about balance really. And nothing really has changed. It's about balance. You need the skills to play the game. And hurling and camogie, more than any sport, there are so many skills in it. You can't just walk down the first night and take part in a normal game because you can't raise the ball for a start. Even if you can't strike it out of your hand. You can't hook, you can't block, you can't solo. So unless you bring those skills into your sessions, it's pointless having them in the game. So I'd be very strong on starting the children. Their game is going to be on the ground, and it'll be all on the ground. And that could be under 10s, that could be under 12s. Certainly some of their time it'll be all on the ground, that they become proficient on that. To me, the first basic essential skill of hurling is to be able to strike a ball on the ground. And funny enough, it's not that hard to learn. And if children learn it and do it, they'll actually enjoy a game very, very quickly. If I had a group of under 6s and give me a couple of nights with them, swinging the hurl, hitting a big ball, it won't take long before they're able to hit it. And then straight away you can get into little three-a-side games and have great fun. Now, little by little, then you're introducing the other skills. And take rising and striking out of the hand. You know, that's something they all want to do, but it takes a while to learn it. So the game that I'd allow them to rise and strike might be just 2-a-side, 3-a-side, where you're not going to have 10 children rooting and poking and prodding on the one ball. So as they're learning, you introduce those skills. Now, with each skill, you get it right first, then you get it fast, and then you get it fast under pressure. And that just makes sense. You know, pressure can be, it can be time, okay, or it can be an opponent, okay. I think Kevin is in with me there tonight. Kevin, have you landed there? Kevin Kelly, I think I see you there. Hello, Kevin. Maybe not yet. Okay. So folks, we move on then, and after looking at the skills, individual skills, raising and catching, hooking and blocking, striking and hand passing. And you could say them off very, very quickly. However, there are sub-skills. You know, striking is complex, really. There are quite a few different ways of striking. And we got to learn them all. We got to coach them all. And I have it learned off nearly at this stage. How many different types of striking are there? Well, I'll rattle a few off. The striking off the right, the striking off the left. The striking on the ground, the striking from your hand, the striking a ball over your head. The striking a ball that's stationary, the striking a ball that's moving towards you, the striking a ball that's moving away from you. Then the question is, you that's striking, are you standing, or are you running, or are you sprinting? Because there are 3 totally different strikes, and one harder than the next. Then where are you striking? Okay, if you're striking to a colleague, where is that colleague? Is he or she standing, or jogging, or sprinting? Because again, there's a fair difference in how to strike to a player that's standing. That's a lot easier than striking to a player that's running at full speed. Now, I still haven't mentioned distance. So how far can you strike? How far can your player strike? Off the right, off the left? That's huge. And then when you have all that done, we bring in the word accuracy. It's grand to be able to strike and have distance, but if you're not accurate, well, we have work to do. So what's acceptable? Well, again, it depends on your group of players and it depends on where they're at. But let's say tonight is coaching children. Now, what's a child? Sure, we'll just say if a child is under 12 down. Some under 12s can strike a ball 60 metres right and left. Some under 12s can strike a ball 5 metres on the ground. So it depends on the group you have. But ultimately, what are you looking for? Ultimately, you're looking for all the variations I've mentioned, including distance. But then when you have that sorted, you're looking for accuracy. Now, what's required in a game? Well, if I say, can you strike a ball X distance to go between two poles 10 metres apart? You say, yeah, maybe that's pretty good. But it's not good enough for a game, really. Can you strike that ball to go between two cones 5 metres apart? Now, even that's not good enough. To be accurate in a game, to be able to strike a ball to your colleague so that your colleague just has to put a hand out, reach right or left, or take maybe a step or two, you're looking to be accurate to maybe a ball travelling between two poles 2 metres apart. Now, as they move up along 14, 16s, adulthood, they definitely have to be able to do that. So what I'm doing is now, I'm just trying to emphasize that within each of the essential skills, there are sub-skills in there. So you can go down through them yourself and you can see, yeah, Jenny, there's a lot more to hand passing than just standing 5 yards away from somebody and firing the ball to them. Now, this little slide was just put up, I suppose, to emphasize the points I've made, but you could do worse than actually printing off something like that. Do up one for yourself and print it off. And each night when you come training, you ask yourself, have I done this? Have I done that? And after maybe 5 or 6 weeks, you look over it all and you say, right, have we missed out on something? Because it's very easy to miss out on things unless you actually write down what you're doing. So I'd be an advocate of actually jotting down there what skills you're covering so that after 5 weeks, you look back and say, we didn't do any ground hurling. Or maybe we didn't do any hand passing on the run. And what are you doing then? You're leaving a gap. Because ultimately skills and drills most of them are done unopposed. And if you can't perform them unopposed, well, there's not much hope of performing them when you are opposed. So now, Kevin, I'm looking at are you in there, Kevin?
I am, Martin. Can you hear me?
Good. I haven't Damien here yet, so I was only flicking between screens here trying to see where you're there. Folks, I just want to welcome Kevin Kelly there. Kevin is Ulster Hurling Development Manager, and quite a few of you know him, quite a few of you mightn't. So happy that he has joined us here tonight. Kevin, were you in there? Were you watching there for a while?
I was. I've been watching from the beginning, Martin.
Right. Listen, do you want to chip in there with any comments on anything we've covered there, even to emphasise some of the things or some things that might be fresh in your own head, please?
Yeah. No, I think the way what you've described so far has been it's actually very organised, and it's good for a coach starting out to look at them there and to take a few wee tips and trying to focus on it. Like I'm just thinking of myself. I was taking down a few notes myself, and I was thinking about like whenever you're doing your warm up, it's a lovely time to try and get a few basic skills done. If you're really going to focus a lot on the games within the session, then through the warm-up is a lovely time to try and get a bit of skill work done. The other one that I love, you call it the three goals and in game. I love that game, Martin, for at the very beginning of the session, particularly to get kids there in time. So as 3 players arrive, and possibly you might have a parent or somebody giving you a bit of a hand, you can send them over to one of the wee goals and they can start playing their game and away they go. So 2 players playing and 1 player in goal, as you already said. Now, once you've got a number of games set up, you're already flying. You're actually going to have it set up where you could play 3 against 3 then, if you really wanted. But I always do it in a bit of a sneaky way, that whenever I see the last wee 2 kids coming down to training, normally that's the time I call all the kids back in again. Everybody comes back in and we get ready for the session, and these 2 are saying, but Kevin, we never got to play in the game. And I'd be like, well, if you're there in time, maybe a wee bit sharper the next evening, you'll get in. But I make sure now they get to play the next game straight away, because I don't like to see anybody missing out.
Super, Kevin. Thanks a million for that. And just as you mentioned that, folks, you know, even with the coaching youths and adults, when to play the game is interesting, because as Kevin has said there, if you play it at the start, it can definitely encourage those players, and I'm thinking more adults now than children, because children normally they're relying on mommy or daddy to drive them down. But with adults, a lot of your adults will be late to training, or your youth, because they couldn't be bothered, and they're a little bit iffy about maybe some of the hard work is being done early on. Whereas if you play your game first, there's a big plus in that sometimes. Now, another little point, and it's not totally relevant to this workshop, it's more for adults again. When you're playing your game, now I'm talking about your 15-a-side game or your 10-a-side game, and you're looking for a maximum quality, you know, you really want the players to work. Now, if you're already after putting them through 30 or 40 minutes of heavy skills and drills, well, they mightn't have the energy then to give you what you want in the game. So by playing the game first, you're getting them at their best. And also, you're preparing them for championship, really, because, you know, you don't do 40 minutes of skills and drills and running around the place before a championship game. You just do the basic warm-up and away you go. So that's something worth considering. Kevin, just come in at any stage there yourself if you have something to add. Just feel free, because
No problem.
I just can't see you from my end of it here, so you might do that if it suits. So, folks, this little list here that's up in front of you now is it was just, if you want to call it, the blueprint for putting together that video, and we can send it on to you maybe tomorrow if you want it. We tried to organise the skills here roughly in line with the essentials. Try to keep, you know, the striking ones together, the first touch together, then the hand passing together, just for organisational purposes. Now, you're only looking at 20 there. There's actually 35 on the whole sheet. And basically, it was just a little explanation of the drill then as to why we were doing it, and maybe a little name on it. So, you know, that set of videos will keep you going for life in underage hurling. You have as much as you're ever going to need, and I know for certain there's more there than I've ever used. And if you were to pick out a few of the main ones and do them every night, if you were doing, we'll say, stations-based training, you know, I'd repeat the main ones every night and then just swap around some of the others. So as I said, if there's 35 of them there, if you were doing 5 a night, well, there's at least 7 nights training there with a total variety. So you might consider looking at something like that. Now, to Kevin, can I pull you in there just on the stations-based training versus the non-stations-based training? Have you any views, either or would you mix them?
I think, Martin, the two of them are a great idea. And I actually like what you said there in the previous statement, where you can sort of mix and match. The station-based approach is very good if you're looking to get new people involved in coaching, particularly hurling or camogie, who maybe don't have a background in it. So they're just there basically looking after a station and just making sure that there's no messing between the kids, and they're doing their exercises, what you've set out, as safely as possible. So I think the station-based approach is really good. It's particularly good if you're running an indoor session, particularly with nursery kids. So it's perfect for them. And again, it works again an indoor session for any age group, because it keeps it nice and, you know, it's not completely linear, but it keeps it under control and nice and structured. If you're all maybe playing off the one wall or something like that. Taking it away from the station-based approach, then you have a wee bit more variety, and then it probably emphasises the point that I made earlier there. It's not as linear, so you can try and move them about and make it more game-specific as you need.
Super, Kevin. Thanks for that. So, folks, you know, it's worth trying both ways, you know, and sometimes it depends on what help you have. One time I thought that, you know, when you have plenty of help, the stations is easier run, but maybe when you don't have the help, maybe it's as easy as well if you're on your own. Well, you wouldn't be on your own anymore, but if there's only 2 of you there and you have 6 stations, it's probably a little bit more organised that you can just run up and down through the different stations and rotate them. So definitely it's worth trying both ways. And as Kevin has said there, and I've said it already, but I'll emphasise it, a super way of getting people involved, and you'll see when we get into some of the little videos now what we're talking about. So just moving on a little bit further, before we do any coaching, you know, the size of the hurl is so important, because the hurl is the extension of your hand or your arm, and if you start out with a hurl that's too big or too small, well, you're probably going to compromise the child's swing. And I would often say, if you can give a child in particular the gift of a good strike, you've given him or her a gift for life. You know, a good striker, just think about it, in any sport, not just hurling and camogie, in any sport, a good striker or a kicker or whatever, that player is just going to stand out a mile. Let it be table tennis or badminton or tennis or, you know, basketball. Okay, it's not a strike, it's a throw. Football, it's a kick. So if you can give a hurler or a camogie player a good strike, you have set them up for life. And you can picture in your own mind beautiful strikers, backs, forwards, doesn't matter. The forward that can just ping a ball over the bar from maximum distance, the defender that can just clear a ball effortlessly down the field over the half back line. You couldn't buy it. Now, where does striking come from? Well, striking comes from having a good swing. And if you don't have a good swing, you're not going to have a good strike. And where does a good swing come from? A good swing comes from a good grip. So if you don't have a good grip, I'm not saying you won't be able to strike, but your strike will be compromised. And straight away, if you're gripping the hurl with your strong hand, you're going to have a stronger swing. End of story. If you're gripping it with your weaker hand, you're not going to have as strong a swing. Now, is it life and death whether you grip it with your strong or your weaker hand? It's not life or death. However, you know, definitely, if you're sword fighting and you can only pick that sword up with one hand, you know which hand you're going to pick it up with, because your life depends on it. Now, just to talk about the length of the hurl, the image on the left there shows that hurl is about 6 inches too long. And Damien Coleman there, Damien might join us in a while. I learned a lovely little way of explaining this to coaches a couple of years ago. I was sitting in on a nursery workshop Damien was conducting, and we all brought our own hurls, and he got us to kneel down. And he says, okay, right, we're kneeling down with our hurls. Now, he says, start raising the ball and start hitting the ball and try and play a little game. Sure, it was absolutely impossible, because you had 6 inches or 9 inches of a hurl in the way, sticking into your ribs. You couldn't raise the ball, you couldn't swing it. And that's what a child is facing if you give him or her a hurl that's too long. Now, the middle image, the hurl is when the player stands up straight, shoulders back, arms hanging by the side. That hurl is about 6 inches off the ground. So, in my opinion, that's too short. The clip on the right then, when the player grips the hurl strongly. Now, if you don't grip the hurl strongly, you take the player in the middle. If he wasn't holding that hurl strongly, that hurl would fall down by his boot and it would be a little bit closer to the ground. And it wouldn't look as short. But when you grip it strongly, the hurl is going to automatically come at a slight angle. And my take on it then is, when you grip it strongly like that, arm down by your side, and let your arm swing like a pendulum, the heel of that hurl should just brush across the ground. Now, be clear on it, it's a personal choice. If you want a heavy hurl or a light hurl, it's a personal choice. If you want a big long hurl, a telescopic hurl, that's grand. If you want a little wooden spoon, that's grand. So all we're doing here is trying to make, I suppose, a couple of sensible arguments, right? So we've made the one about the hurl being too long. Now, the hurl being too short, that's normally a problem with teenagers, starting with teenagers, that we'll say that player there had, we'll say, a 32-inch hurl when he was 10. And now he's 16 and is about a foot longer or 2 foot longer, and he's still using the 30-inch hurl. And that's where I think players lose out a bit, because, you know, they're losing out on reaching ball for a start, the amount of ball that they'll miss for rising, for flicking. They're losing out on the length of the hurl for taking a long shot. you never see a golfer teeing off with a putter. And I would maintain with a long hurl, it's easy shorten it, because players will tell you, I use a short hurl so that I won't be hooked. And that's grand. Well, you can shorten a long one, but you can't lengthen a short one. Now, with children, I would say, get that hurl light, so that they can swing it around. If in doubt, go short. Without a shadow of doubt with children, if in doubt, go short, because you're looking at, first of all, the priority with children is that they can swing the hurl, that they can handle it with one hand, and then obviously with two hands. Now, little image on the left, that little game of Zorro, great little game for working on the wrists. But if I ask those children to play the little game of Zorro, and they're trying to play it for a minute, and they're either putting two hands on the hurl, or the hurl is falling to the ground, well, either the hurl is too heavy, or the wrist is too weak, or a combination of both. Now, so to have that hurl light enough that the player can flick it around there effortlessly, that's key. So we would recommend that if in doubt at all, go lighter and go shorter, because the short hurl obviously is going to be lighter. And when they get the swing on it, then they can start lengthening the hurl a bit to, I suppose, cater for the couple of reasons I was giving you there. Kevin, you might just mention, and we might show a little clip of it later, you might just mention the little wristies, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Martin, it probably backs up your point there that you're saying about the length of the hurley or the hurl hand, using it for a child. So you're making it smaller and light, just like the wee wristy you have there. So on it, you're thinking that the hurl for the child, whenever they start playing, is basically an extension of their arm. So if the hurl's too heavy or too long, and they go to try and strike the ball and miss the ball, then there's a good chance that they'll not be as excited about the game, because we all know whenever you hit that ball right for the first time, it's a lovely feeling, and we know the feeling or the sound even whenever you strike the ball right. But the wee wristy is only about 12 inches to 14 or 16 inches long, depending on the age group you have, and all you've got is the boss on it is going to be bigger. It's going to be bigger than a normal traditional wee one if you were putting a hurl for that size. But it's basically that the child can hold the hurl in their dominant hand, so the hand that they can write with. And if they get used to that wee hand and being able to be a wee bit rusty, that's obviously where we stuck the name rusty on it. They can be a wee bit rusty with that hurl. Then they've got their other hand to do the bit of catching with a beanbag or a ball or a tennis ball or even a balloon. And then they're throwing the ball or balloon, and then they're able to strike it and whip through with their other hand. And it's a great wee introduction, brilliant for nursery children who are just starting off. But then I would urge that if you are going to be playing a wee game with them, then you're probably going to try and get them using a hurl based on the sizes that you have just on your previous slide, because you'll want them striking the ball on the ground as well. Again, I think clubs could invest really well in a wee set of wristy hurls and use them between the nursery groups for both hurling and camogie, because they'll never be needing them the same night. And it's a great wee tool to be using, and particularly to be bringing it into the primary schools as well.
Kevin, thanks very much for that. So, folks, you know, that's very important. And just moving on there to, you know, you don't have to be too technical as a coach. You know, if you never played the game in your life, you can become an excellent coach in hurling and camogie. But one or two little things are important, and what you're looking at there in front of you is one of those little things, that when a child is swinging on the ball, it's hugely important that they lock the hands, like the image on the right hand side, because hurling is a wristy action. Now, the image in the center, there's a gap between the player's hands, which means that player won't be swinging with a wristy action. They'll be shoveling the ball, and you will never have the same strike. In fact, I've seen girls in particular, and it probably comes from the hurls being too heavy when they're young, that in order to lift it, they have to put the two hands and separate the hands, and they start pushing the ball as opposed to swinging on it. And I have seen girls play camogie for Kilkenny, brilliant players. They have it everything you could want in the game, catching and tackling and winning ball, but the strike lets them down. because probably that hurl from day one was too heavy. Now, what will it mean in long term? It'll probably mean that you're going to be striking a slitter 20 or maybe 30 meters shorter than you would if you were swinging properly. And I'd be fairly sure on that. So I won't fight with you as to which hand you grip the hurl with. I will encourage a youngster as far as I can to grip the hurl with their stronger hand. But if they insist on gripping it with their weaker hand, I'll fight with them if there's a gap between the hands. I'll also fight with them if they're catching the ball with the grip hand. So if you look at the player there, okay, the grip hand holds the handle right at the butt of the hurl, and theoretically it never leaves there. Now it does on some occasions, but theoretically it doesn't. And you catch the ball with the lower hand. If you don't, so if you take the chap there in the centre, if he catches the ball with his right hand, which is his grip hand, you know, you're going to have 6 inches of a hurl in his way as he's swinging. And the whole sweetness of the stroke is lost because he's leading, he's starting the stroke with 6 inches of a hurl sticking out at the end, and then he puts his hand in on it just as he's about to contact, and he knocks the whole hurl out of balance. So I think that makes a lot of sense. All right. Now Damien is not in with us yet, but Damien normally comes in on this slide here, but I don't know, he's on a workshop in Connacht and he must have just gotten caught there. Still no sign of him, so we're going to have to jump on this one. It's all about, you know, what way do you group players for skills and drills and games? You know, do you put a big strong player in the same drill or skill with a new player, a young player? You know, so you can be talking about strength, you can be talking about ability, you can be talking about how long you're playing the game. To me, it's very, very simple. And having spent 38 years as a primary teacher, I was doing this stuff unknown to myself all my life, whether it was on the hurling field or in the classroom. And I'd be very, very strong, and I'd be interested to hear what Kevin has to say on it now in a moment. I'd be very, very strong on grouping players according to ability, right? Grouping them according to ability, which even with adults, I do the same. Now, normally players will fall into groups that suit themselves anyway. If you have 20 or 30 children down the field and you're doing striking or whatever you're doing, you know, without you organising it, they'll normally fall into little groups that suit themselves. If you're working with adults and let's say you have a mixture, you have a senior team and a junior team in the club and they're all training together, you know, normally they'll fall in together into similar groups. To me, it makes sense because if you're out of your depth, there's no learning. If I'm working with players that are too strong for me, there's no learning for me and there's no learning for them. Now, you know, there's often a little bit of overlap. Needless to say, there's often a little bit of overlap and it's no big deal. So in order for the learning to take place, you group them according to ability. When it comes to the game, the same. You know, there's no point in having a player that's so strong that they just win every ball. And putting limitations on that player, sometimes you might have to because you might have no choice. But putting limitations on that player, that Kevin is strong, like Kevin, you can't raise the ball in this game or you can't shoot, that is unfair on the stronger player. So if you can at all, you balance them. Now, in layman's terms, if you have, we say, your adults, your senior team and your junior team training together, well, I'd put my senior backs on marking my junior backs or marking my senior forwards at one end of the field and my junior backs marking my junior forwards at the other end of the field. That'd be normal enough. Okay, on some occasions, I'll mix them around. But I still have a junior back on a junior forward and a senior back on a senior forward. Now, needless to say, some players, there'll be a little bit of an overlap and they can mix and match. But basically, if I'm going down training tomorrow, I'm not going to go in and mark Joe Canning. You know, I'm not going to mark Seamus Cummins because they won't learn and I surely to God won't learn. Damien came up with a bit of research on that recently, which is called biobanding. And if you want to Google it, you can read on it. So obviously it has become it has become something that people are talking about and people are doing research on it. You know, it's there all my life. But an interesting one I found there was sometimes parents might be saying, I want my son or my daughter up there with the strong players, even though they're not strong enough to be up there. Well, the way I look at it is you explain, you explain the issue to them, and you try and say, look, there's no point in your little boy or girl going up there with the strong players that won't get any puck of the ball. Now, if they're insisting, which are put Mary up or put Michael up there with the stronger player for a while and see how they get on. But interesting in the little bit of research we have in front of you there, the biobanding experts now will say that if you don't separate them, you're discriminating against them, subject on a maturity bias. So it's interesting the way people can turn it. Kevin, do you want to come in at this stage on that?
Martin, Damien's actually there now. Damien,
he has arrived. How are you, Damien? You're welcome in there.
Martin, thanks. And Kevin, that's a great way of getting out of it, Kevin. Fair play to you.
That was a good, he passed the ball.
I've learned from the best, boys. I've learned from the best.
Good man, you're a good dodge. And thanks, Kevin. Martin, apologies I'm in late. We were delivering an Award 1 in Connacht there, provincial course, so apologies for that. But yeah, the whole area of biobanding, abilities matching, it has to be taken seriously for sure. The sports science backs it up. So it's not opinion. And when something isn't opinion, someone said to me once, without data, opinion is only opinion. But there is data on this. And, so just take the chronological there versus the biological argument. So I'm 12, Martin, but I could be in the body of a 14-year-old physically. You're 12, the same age as me chronologically, but you could be in the body of an 8-year-old physically. Now you put those two bodies up against each other because they're the same age, it makes no sense. A physically more mature 12-year-old is going to have a huge advantage on a less physically more mature 12-year-old. So I'd be promoting and advocating for sure, Kevin and Martin, the abilities matching groups, make your groups. I'm strong on the thirds. So your bottom third child in ability, go into that, play against the bottom third children. The middle third children play against the middle third children. And the top third children play against the top third children. And if you have a top third child there in ability, physically, and also in ability, technically in the game of hurling or camogie, and you put them marking the bottom third child, well, they're both actually regressing because, the bottom third child can't get a touch of the ball, but the top third child isn't getting challenged appropriately. So I think there's only a success there when you match them off. You can have your multi-pitches. That's why we do the Go games. Multi-pitches, abilities matching, 5v5s. Let the enjoyment happen there then from the bottom up. There's no enjoyment for a young fella or a young girl there if they're matched off with someone just on technically, tactically and team play wise and also physically at a better ability level than them. They need to catch up and they need to build a success first. So give them the successes there by marking like ability players. So I think, Martin, that's where I'm at on it. And again, as we said, opinion is only opinion unless there's data to back it up. So there is data to back this up. And I just think it might be no harm for people on the call here tonight now to have a little self-reflection there and a little bit more awareness of how they might be dividing up their groups. And maybe be strong there against any opinion that would come in against it. Everyone likes to see little Johnny in the top third, but little Johnny isn't having any success in the top third if his ability says he should be in the bottom or middle third. And our job as coaches is develop the child's confidence, which is a psychological, and our other job as a coach is develop the child's competence, which is the physical. So I think that's where I stand on that there, Martin, for sure, and Kevin.
Super, Damien. That's great. The Damien, are you able to get in on the chat there? If anyone has a question at this point in time, we can take them. If you can view them there, can you?
Yeah, I can. There's two there, Martin, as I can see. Can you see more, Kevin, or two?
No,
Martin,
no,
just wondering if you will be.
I can see the two you can see.
Good. So I'll take the first one, Kevin. You can take the second. So Martin, will you be sending on the presentation after the meeting?
Yeah, we'll do that. All right, Damien. We'll do that. I'll get it out there tomorrow or the next day to people. Yeah, and just if anybody, if you got the link directly from me, it means I have your email address. If you didn't, if you got it from somebody else, just send me an email to martin.fogarty@ga.ie and we'll get the clips out to you. Okay. So if anyone has questions there, folks, you can put them in and we'll take them. If we don't take them now, we can take them down the line there a little bit. So where do those questions go in, Damien? Under the Q&A or under the chat, is it? Q&A, I think.
They're in under the questions, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can put in your question through the chat, yeah.
Okay, Damien. Thanks, Kevin.
So look at again, if Kevin wants to come in there, I don't want to take over now the minute I came on there, but Martin, would you start abilities matching at under 8?
Oh yeah. I'd start them as soon as they come in the door. I surely would, yeah. What do you think, Kevin? Would you?
Funny, we've discussed this before. I'm a wee bit sitting on the fence on this one, and it's basically, I do believe in what you're saying. I do believe that the abilities need to match, but I would sort of mix and match it a wee bit. Maybe 1 week in particular, you might just go strong with the strong and weak with the weak, or or as Damien said, with the 3 classes, and then maybe the next week you might put them in their school classes together. The next week it could be their size, as in physical size, together. And then another one which I would often encourage too is the effort. When I see children there, and particularly the younger age groups, and the children are there and they're never missing, and they might not be the greatest, but they work damn hard. Well, I would like to praise and give a wee bit for a bit of effort as well. But I would be backing what Damien's saying there around the bioban. Unfortunately, just the way the GAA is set up and our club competitions are set up, it doesn't really have it. Or we do have it in a way, Martin, where you might have an under 13 and he's very good and strong and he's able to play up with under 15s. But we definitely don't have it the other way, where an under 15 can play down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And look at folks, it often doesn't raise its head at all. You know, if you have a bunch, if I have a bunch of junior infants or senior infants in school and they're starting out, by and large, most of them are at the same level anyway. But if you have a few players and they're just, you could have a youngster there of 5 years of age and can already strike the ball out of his or her hand. So if there's a couple of them, you'll slip them down to one end and let them puck away. Where you will get a bigger problem is probably in areas where children are joining late. You've got a child of 12 years of age coming in, starting hurling, and the rest of them have been hurling for the last 5 years. So, in cases like that, you have to be gentle with the new player and you have to explain to them, and they understand that by and large. So it's usually not an issue at all. So, okay, so look, we'll move on a little bit then, folks. And as I said, if you have questions there, pop them in and the lads will spot them there somewhere.
Yeah, there's a few more questions, Martin, but do you want to move on?
Yeah, go on with one or two of them there for the moment, sure.
I run Niall there, he runs 80 kids under 8. What age should he group strong with strong, etc.?
He runs 80, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, Damien, as soon as it becomes obvious that there's a need for it, right? If it's pucking on the ground, for example, well, my group in there, you wouldn't even notice it. It just means that the players that can strike the ball on the ground 30 meters will be kind of matched off, and the players that can only strike at 10 meters or 5 meters will be matched off, and that makes sense because there's nobody wants to be embarrassed. Like if you're only to strike at 5 meters and you're matched in with someone can strike at 30, that doesn't work. So, other little drills like dribbling a ball, that won't matter. If you're working on the pole trainers, that won't matter. Even raising the ball, a little drill like that, it doesn't really matter. All it means is the stronger player is flying out there and picking it on the first turn. The weaker player maybe isn't. So a lot of times it won't matter, but I'd be watching it carefully. And as I said, as soon as the need arises, as soon as there is a gap and a noticeable gap, I'd be nudging them up and down. Have you any different opinion on it yourself or Kevin there? Shout. If not, move on with the next question.
I know, we're good, Martin, yeah. And look at just a little bit of questions there around if club policy doesn't allow for this, what do you do? And then the other questions around separating friends, you know, that's an issue, separating friends on this. But look at, lads, I think, Martin, my answer to that would be, you know, you promote a lot there on station learning. And if you've station learning, that's bio-abandon in a way, because if you've 10 stations and you have 4 kids in each station, and then after 3 minutes to move on to station 2 and after 6 minutes to move on to station 3, that's bio-abandon, because you want abilities matching in the 4s or the 6s, whatever you put in a station. So that's sort of where it's at. It's not leaving anybody out. There shouldn't be any big issue around club policies on this. This is best practice now. And
I'd be slow to make any policy on that. I just, you know, I wouldn't make a policy on it for a start. I'd, you know, I'd be using my head as to what's necessary. Now, as regards separating friends, I mean, we're all friends. I wouldn't buy into that either. You know, you're down in the field to play at the hurl. We're all friends. We're all a team. So, you know, I don't have to be going with you there and Kevin every night just because we're pally. You just, you know, I'd break that straight away and just work away. You know, because the same thing is going to come when you're going down the line a bit farther and you're picking teams. So just because Damien Coleman is full forward doesn't mean Martin Fogarty has to be in one corner and Kevin Kelly has to be in the other. So I'd be breaking a lot of that straight away, Damien. And look at this, came up in a couple of other workshops. Again, look at, as I said, I spent a life teaching and I'd be used to this kind of stuff, whereas no coaches aren't used to it. I wouldn't have anyone dictating to me, you know, and I'm talking obviously about parents, you know, telling me what way to be coaching them and how to coach them. And I tell them I'll coach them my way. And if you want to coach them, which you can come down and coach them some other night. Because if you're, I suppose, mollycoddling to what parents think, you're lost. And when it comes to picking teams, well, then you're in serious trouble if you need to run the team across the parents. So if you have any different opinion there, lads, shout now.
No, I'm good, Martin, to be honest. Martin, just we might move on. There's about 35 questions here now. I'll try and get a handle on a few of them here while you're moving on the show. Is that all right?
Okay, right. Super. So look at, folks, what we're doing now is, as I said, the little video that we recommended you to look. You can look at it in your own time. Hopefully it might run reasonably well tonight. And all we're doing here is pulling out a few examples of it and just to trying to, I suppose, emphasize to you why we do these. Now, the first one is striking, and not by chance. You know, to me, striking is up there at the top of the list. And, you know, it's not that one skill is more important than another, but definitely striking is so important. I would do it every night in training, every single night. Now, striking for some might be striking tires if they're just new and they're working on their swing. It might be striking the balls on a rope, whatever. It could be striking anything. Just to mention there, with the little small children starting out, the bigger the ball, the easier it is to hit. So bear that in mind. You don't want to be putting a little size 3 ball there for a beginner because they'll miss it. Whereas you give them even a football and strike away with the football and they'll get a bit of enjoyment out of it. Or a small football, a light football. And that's where the Go Games balls come in. The first touch is kind of like a big hurling ball, a small football. So that's important. So I'll just run this here. Damien or Kevin, you might tell me if the sound is working here. It's voiced over. You might tell me if you can hear it.
Striking is possibly the
Yes, I can hear it, Martin.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Have a good strike, you must have a good swing. And in order to develop a good swing, you need to have a good grip. This little routine helps develop a good grip and a strong, flexible wrist. It also works on movement and footwork, which are hugely important in all sports. The coach ensures that the players are holding the hull with their strong or dominant hand.
Okay, so what you're watching for there, folks, is, we're working on the grip. we're working on being able to handle that hurl, because ultimately, if you cannot handle that hurl, you're going to be deficient in your skills. And that comes back there to the weight of the hurl, the length of the hurl, that you're able to flick it, and basically you'll control the ball, etc. Built into that little exercise then also was the footwork. And if you noticed the way we had the girls skipping forward, they weren't walking forward and back, because if you walk forward and back, you'll fall over yourself, especially going backwards. That they're skipping forward, skipping back, and that's bringing them on to, at a later stage, learning how to hook and how to block, that they're able to skip into an opponent and skip out from an opponent. So very, very simple little one, hugely important. Now, the next one is, again, all in the same area of striking. So we're looking at swinging here, and just keep an eye out and see. And again, as I said to you, especially new coaches, don't in the slightest be worried about being technical. Let them play away, let them flake away there or whatever they're doing, and they'll pick up the little skills themselves. So you don't have to be stopping them and starting them. Let them work away. But you might just notice, are they locking their hands? And you might just notice their leg positions. Are they leaning into the ball? Now, I'll just highlight the little picture on the top of the right. Little girl there with the pink and white helmet. She has a lovely stance. She's got her two legs slightly bent. She's leaning into the ball. Her hurl is up over her head, almost parallel to the ground. Hands are locked, elbows are up, and she gets a beautiful swing. Now, you see her when the clip gets going, how good she is on the swing. And I do note that when she's going down the far side and striking off her left, she's not as good, because obviously she's just learning it. Whereas on the right, she's swinging hurl over her head. When she's striking on her left, she's only swinging up to her hip. So obviously she has a little bit more to do on her left. The girl straight in front of you on the right, the position she's in at the moment, the two legs are standing up dead straight nearly. It'll be easy enough to knock her off a ball. So the little girl on the left is more bent into the ball. So you needn't worry about those things. I wouldn't even stop and correct them. What I would do from time to time is get the children to stand shoulder to shoulder and push each other. That'll make them bend down so that they won't be pushed over. Push each other and then swap shoulders, go around to the other side and do the same. And that'll give them the little introduction to I suppose, the proper stance for striking a ball. So just watch this one now as well.
Swinging on an imaginary ball for a few moments in every training session will develop a player's striking ability. Coaches should watch out for proper technique and good footwork. The players are working on both sides. The coach watches to make sure that the players are locking their hands and getting good wrist, elbow and shoulder action. Striking the slitter hard does not mean it will go further. A smooth, relaxed stroke will yield much better results. Here the players are simulating catching a high ball and striking to the net or over the bar. Striking tires is an excellent way to develop a good swing, as the bounce of the hurl off the tire helps to get good motion into the arms and shoulders. A good swing will have the elbows raised with the hurl and hands going above the shoulder, the hurl almost parallel to the ground. Again, it is very important to practice striking from both sides. When striking, the player should not hold the hurl too tightly, firmly but not tightly. A good tip is to not choke the hurl. The first little girl in this line with the pink helmet has excellent technique when striking on her right side. She has a little bit of work to do on her left as she is not getting a full swing.
Here she comes now, girls and boys. Look, there's a great little stroke. And again, the hands are locked. If the hands weren't locked, she will not have that stroke. Now watch her as she runs down along, striking off her left just in a moment now. She's coming into picture now. There you are. Look, she's just swinging a little bit above her hip. It's not the same wristy action, but that will come in time.
This exercise introduces the players to running side by side in preparation for a shoulder-to-shoulder clash. In all these exercises, it is very important that players work on their right and left sides.
It's hard to beat the tires, folks, you know, for working on that swing. You just get a great feeling of it. Now, what I was saying to you earlier there about getting the players to push each other, even without the hurls. Those two little girls now in front of you, something like that if they lean in against each other and push, you know, automatically your outside leg will go back to try and give you more strength, and you'll crouch down a little bit so you won't be pushed over too easily. And that's you know, that's a little initiative there is worth working on. Now, just striking then again, we're moving it on here now to older players, and again, working right, working left. These fellas now could actually be further back, but just for the video purposes, we put them in close enough. So you couldn't, you know, if you think back to one of the earlier slides, all the different types of striking. So we're getting into them now at this stage. So I'll roll this one again now.
The ability to strike a ball well on the ground from either right or left sides is the foundation of playing the game of hurling and camogie. Here the players are working on their strike and are also learning to stop the ball. Vary the distance according to ability. This exercise is suitable for players from nursery right through to inter-county seniors. Here we have the fundamental but essential skill of striking from the hand and catching. Again, increase the distance according to ability. The players here are working on their touch. Note the player who moves every time before striking. This is an excellent habit to develop and will result in him being very difficult to dispossess in a game. I would rate this exercise as being one of the most important for players of all ages, particularly for young players. The player in the middle attempts to move the ball and strike it without letting it stop. The players at the end control the ball and move it away quickly.
So there you have a progression of striking. Damien, Kevin, you know, want to come in and emphasise any of those things that we've looked at there so far?
Other, Martin, than saying that you've shown a number of different examples, and you mentioned the tires there as well, that variation is probably key. And the more opportunities that the players get of trying different techniques of it, it'll stand to them a lot better. I do believe in varying it an awful lot. I think it's a good idea. But then again, remember that the main thing about the striking is trying to get the ball from A to B as fast as possible. So working on that technique is definitely the key.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Damien, have you any comments to make on anything there so far?
No, Martin, good. I'm just working away here in the text box for a minute.
Grand, Damien, thank you.
I tell you one thing, they've a lot of questions for you, Martin. I hope you're not going home early tonight.
Hold on, Damien, that's why you're here.
At least you're staying over.
I'm staying over tonight, yeah. Where are you? You booked in tonight as well. Kevin, you all booked into the same place, yeah?
I'm outside the Connacht Centre here in the front lawn in the grass. They won't let me inside the building there with the COVID rules.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame them, Damien. Anyway, so look at, folks, just while it's in my head, you know, in a club there where maybe you're trying to attract a few players to hurl, play camogie, and maybe they're kicking football and they haven't hurled. I guarantee you, if you put a few tires out there, and you put out those balls on a pole, on a string, or the little pole trainers, and as your players are passing back from kicking a bit of football, and they say, lads or girls, you want to try this out? I guarantee you, there'll nobody pass a tire and a hurl left down beside it without having a few slaps at it. Great little ways, and there's a bit of fun in it of getting new players involved or even to try them out. And I would strongly suggest from time to time you have a little, you know, the camogie do it in the, I forget what you call it, Kevin, you would know, come play with me or something like that, where a little trial out, where you might invite down parents and children, a mixture or separately, doesn't matter, and couple of little stations like that, beating the tires, striking balls on the poles, and I guarantee you they will enjoy it. Okay, so just moving on to the next one here now and see what we have coming up. The hand pass is something that's neglected, but it's a hugely important skill, and it's a brilliant skill. At adult level, some players are not competent at hand passing 5 meters, whereas other players could pass a ball maybe 30 meters on the run. It's a huge weapon. It's as good as a strike with a hurl in some cases. So just watch the little progression here. And folks, most of what we're shown is non-contact. So with the help of God, if we get out of COVID regulations soon, Kevin and the lads up the north are getting out of them next week. Most of this stuff is non-contact and can be done in the backyard, not to mention down in the field when you do get back to it.
Hand passing is an extremely useful skill that is often neglected by coaches. Like all skills, you build from the bottom. Get proficient standing close to a partner or a wall, increase the distance by degrees, and then bring varying degrees of movement and distance into the exercise. As with most skills, they usually go in twos. While practicing the hand pass, the players are also practicing their catch. Sometimes, depending on ability, a beanbag can be used for catching or soloing. With all drills and indeed games, I would recommend putting players of similar ability together. If a player is too strong or not strong enough for his or her group, then learning can be very limited for that player and frustration can set in. This exercise involves a solo with no hand pass. The players hand the ball to each other. Combining two skills can be difficult for some players, so sometimes it is best to separate the skills until players become proficient. It is good practice to get the players used to taking 4 steps with the ball in their hand. Also, when hand passing, get them to give the pass from a distance, not running up so close that they could hand the ball to their colleague.
Folks, just to make a little point there, right, we had those players grouped in groups of 6, but as you'll notice there for something like the hand passing, we subdivided the group of 6 then into 2 groups of 3. Why? So that they get maximum amount of action. You want to be very careful with that players are getting the maximum amount of action, but with ample amount of recovery time. So, you know, if it's a high level, tough drill that you're doing with your seniors, you know, even 3 goals and in, 1v1 is a killer for a minute or 2. They'll need a bit of time out for that. They'll need a bit of a break. But if it's something there like hand passing and rising, you know, don't have a line of 10. Don't have somebody waiting 10 minutes to get a puck of the ball. So again, just be mindful of that in your little skills and drills. And the next point I'd like to make is there's no rocket science to these skills and drills. And little exercises that you're looking at there, we were doing those 40 years ago. You know, you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. Lines of 3, lines of 4, pucking the ball up and down, it'll always be a good exercise. Now, at the same time, when you're developing a little skill or a drill, be mindful of the game and say, right, what's needed in a game? What are they trying to do in a game? And then try and replicate that. And again, a lot of our skills and drills, you're doing them unopposed. And then you're hoping that when they bring them into a game, they're able to do them opposed. Now, if they can't do them unopposed, they're having the hope of doing them when there's somebody marking them. So be mindful of that also. And as they get better at them, you can put a bit of pressure on. So you take something as simple there now as youngsters doing a hand pass in threes and moving around the field. If you want to put pressure on that, you could have groups of 4. So you have one player not involved in the hand passing, one player trying to spoil the hand passing, and rotate that player. And then you're bringing pressure on, which means now, if I'm trying to pass to Damien, but Kevin is in the way, well, I can't pass to Damien. Either he has to move to the side or I pass to somebody else. So just bear that in mind as you're moving along. Now, the roll lifting and the jab lifting, they're worth looking at. Because, unfortunately, nowadays, many coaches are telling their players to raise everything and not pull on the ground. Now, it's up to yourselves, but I think it's crazy. I think it starts on the ground, and as Shamie Callanan showed with his great goal there a couple of years ago against Wexford, and as Fergal Whiteley showed with his great goal against Kilkenny, you know, the skill of ground hurling at your peril neglected. That's all I would say. So, but because players are so insistent now on rising, well, I would say, well, they might as well be good at it. Now, I'd work on it either ways. I would work on every single skill and try and have my players as proficient as possible in every skill. And then I leave it to the player to decide which club to pull out of the bag for a certain situation. In other words, which skill to pull out of the bag at a certain time. So simple rising here. Watch it for a moment.
Here the players are working on the roll lift and jab lift, practicing one-handed and two-handed lifts. Whether the player turns the palm of his hand up, known as the cup catch, or down, known as the claw catch, is a personal choice. I favour the cup catch, especially when rising, as there is less chance of dropping the ball. Most coaches will insist on the toe of the hurl pointing out or away from the body, as opposed to pointing in. I am not fixated on either method, so long as the player is proficient. In fact, I would make a strong case for pointing the toe in, despite being in a very small minority with that opinion. It is important to put the toe of the hurl, not the heel, under the ball. Many players fail to raise the ball because of this. This little exercise is a must, as not only does it help a player retrieve a lost ball, it trains him or her to keep playing even after making a mistake.
Now, that little set of exercises there, folks, you know, you're looking at a video there which we call Coaching Children, and we have a similar one, Coaching Youth to Adults. Now, we do rising in the both of them, and rising is rising. It's the same skill, it's the same drill. What I'd ask you to watch out for is, in both videos, the children and the youths, how many of the players to try to put the heel of the hurl under the ball instead of the toe, and that costs matches. So when you're starting them out, make sure the toe of the hurl is the little pointy part of the hurl that's shaved off, and it's shaved off for a reason. And the reason is it'll slip in under the ball much easier than the heel. Now, granted, the heels of hurls years ago were much thicker, but either way, I've seen inter-county senior players missing the jab lift because they're trying to put the heel of the hurl under the ball. So just watch out for that. Right, we'll slip along here now again. Right, little bit of catching. I'm going to pass the catching and I'll move on for the catching because you can look at it yourself. I'm going to touch on the hooking. I think somebody texted me in advance of this meeting, Bev. I think if this wasn't the question you have, maybe put it into the text box for the lads. Trying to test my memory. So we'll just roll this here now for the moment. And look at hooking and blocking are, I suppose, they're kind of high-end skills. They wouldn't be the first skill you'd be introducing the youngsters to. They're very, very good skills, but they are a little bit dangerous. When you're hooking, you don't want to get a hurl in your mouth. When you're blocking, you don't want to get your knuckles broken. So you have to treat these with care. So let's just see what we have here.
Like blocking, hooking is an advanced skill and requires confidence and plenty of practice. Starting from a standing position and advancing to walking and then jogging, it is best practiced in slow motion at first until players develop good technique. The balls on the rope create a nice controlled stepping stone between slow motion hooking and a match situation. The player hooking holds his hurl in one hand at full length with the toe pointing up to the sky so that his opponent's hurl will slide up when hooked.
Now, I think, if my memory serves me, it was Bev that contacted me about that. If not, Damien, watch out for a question from Bev. And I think the question was, when you're hooking, would you have the hurl flat or the toe pointing up? And I definitely have the toe pointing up, because if the hurl is flat a strong player might still get the stroke away because you're touching their hurl, but they can still continue with it. Whereas if you have the toe pointing up, the opponent's hurl runs it up along your hurl and goes off up over the toe of it, and it'll fly up in the sky. So there's a huge difference in that. Okay, so we can talk about that after again there if it comes up in the Q&A. What I would recommend to you folks, just looking back at that hooking and even the blocking, to look at them on this little set of videos for children, but also look at this set for youth and adults, because they're the same drills, the same skills, just the youth and adult ones, we're doing them at a different level. Now, if you have a child that's proficient, you know, be it at striking or hooking or blocking, well, they're able to do the same skills as we'd be asking an adult to do. So, you know, you can't really separate them. You take that little girl now that we were looking at earlier with a lovely strike. I mean, she's capable of doing any of the adult drills and skills because she's at that level. So just because we say they're children, it doesn't mean that their skill level is any different. And sometimes the children actually are more skillful. I see little things now like striking a ball overhead, and I see children able to do it. But then I see when they become adults, they're not. And the reason is they don't practice it. Games are so important. And this little video clip now is my old school years and years ago. And you could say this clip probably encompasses everything. And I'm going to be a little bit sarcastic now because some of you have heard me before. And I'm going to say, watch the coaches, watch the coaching inputs, watch the interventions and all that, and you'll learn quite a bit. Now, I just hope it runs.
So before the children go out to play, the teachers help them to organise the teams. We get the helmets and the bibs sorted, the children set up the goals themselves, and when we arrive out, we simply supervise the games. So there's very little actual coaching done, so it's usually just about the mini games.
So folks, I was being sarcastic about the coaching interventions. That's Roseanne there, and I don't think she ever picked a hurl up in her life, but out there at lunchtime and just keeping an eye on the youngsters, and they're playing away their own little games. And starting on the tarmac, having the little infants in first class, nobody raising the ball, just flaking away on the ground, and they're all involved and they're all enjoying it. And then you have the senior classes at one side and the middle classes at the other. And, you know, coming back to the bio-banding, if you put children in the wrong groups there, now the groups are nothing to do with classes, the groups are to do with ability. If they're in the wrong group, you know, there's no learning. Like, you're not going to put somebody there from out in the field on the right hand side down with the little infants, because they'll just take over. And even take the chap there that was running through with a ball on the left hand side, if he was across in the other group, sure, he'd get every ball. So that's the importance of it. Now, I think we're getting close now to the end of this, I think. Right, we'll a small little discussion here on skills testing. And Kevin has a different title for it, which is grand, but basically it is important over a period of time that you try and see where your players are at. And during this COVID time is a great opportunity for the children themselves to see where they're at with each skill. And children love a little challenge, and they love being challenged where they're not being embarrassed by somebody else. In other words, if the challenge is for themselves, that I go down and I'm getting tested or I'm getting assessed or whatever word we want to use for it to see how far can I strike right and left. And then I'm encouraged to go off and practice it. And I come back a month later and I do another little test and I say, Jenny, I'm after improving. And that's what it's all about, improving. So I think a written one there that's being recorded and your coach is recording it and giving you all the encouragement you need. And if possible, you got little rewards for meeting certain targets. Now, you can go so far as having gold, silver and bronze awards and good prizes when you reach them, but you can also have prizes for, you know, improving your own. You might have a youngster there that can never hit, we'll say, the silver award that you might have set up in the club, but they can improve themselves, so that should be rewarded, that the effort is rewarded and the work is rewarded. Kevin, do you want to come in on this whole area of skills testing there for a moment, please?
Yes, Martin. I think it's a particular and very interesting area. As you say, I refer to it as assessment, because it actually backs up what you just said there about maybe somebody not reaching an award. Really, truly, I see it as a great idea as a coach to see how far your players are coming along, and it can be used at all age groups. I don't understand why it's not used at all age groups, and I actually look at my own coaching sometimes and wonder why I don't do a wee bit more of this at different age groups. But the reason I say as an assessment is I think this could be used as a really good tool for a conveyor belt for your players through your club. So if, for example, you turn around and you keep it as simple as you want, there's no right or wrong answers here. But if you turn around and said, for example, take your seven key skills there, if somebody was to do them there, I'd be more focused on, I refer to it as a RAG system, red, amber and green. You might call it the traffic light system. And basically that might mean is, say for example, striking. I'm just going to make one up here, a bit of shooting. So you've got an under 10, and if he can strike the ball from the 13-yard line over the bar, he's able to move on to 21. And if he can do it in the 21, he can move out to 30 yards. So if he's struggling around the 13-yard, he's a red. If he's 21, he's an amber. And if he's out to the green, or if he's out to the 30 yards, like a line made with cones, then he's a green. And you might do that for the right side, and you might do that for the left side. And again, you might turn around to the kids and say, right, the test that we're going to do at our next session is going to be raising the ball. And here's how we're going to do it. And away home, they're able to do a wee bit of homework. Like you said there, during lockdown, it's a perfect opportunity for coaches to be setting little challenges to see where they come on. But the reason I mention about for the conveyor belt is, wouldn't it be great at the end of the season if you turned around to your under 11s and say, and you had a meeting with your hurling coaches together, and you were able to pass on a list of all the names of your players to the under 13 coach and say, look, there's Damien Coleman. He's absolutely flying on both sides, top of the class. You'll have no bother with that boy there. Martin Fogarty, real good player, struggling on his left side. He's an amber in that there, needs to be work on. Kevin Kelly, plenty of potential in that boy up there, but he's sitting at a red in most of these because he doesn't do any hurling when he's at home himself. So maybe you need to do a wee bit of prodding at him to get him going. And there you have a bit of a structure for your coaches going through and refreshing and reviewing at the end of the year where they're going on. The other thing I think that's class about it is it's a great wee homework tool for the kids. If you're coming to the end of the session, instead of just reading up after the match and saying, right, see you again next Tuesday or whatever, you might call in about 5 minutes before and go, look, we're going to go through this wee test, show them what it is, and then have them go away and trial it. And when you come back at the beginning of your next session, then you might do your bit of your warm-up and then start with your test to see where they're at. And that all it does is the one sheet just to tick off to see where the kids are at. And I say the assessment being that it can be as rough as that, you know, as in red, amber, green. You don't have to say, oh, he got 5 out of 10, so he's middle of the road. I think to keep it as simple as possible for the coaches, the better it is. And just a thing on, I see there that I think it might have been Brian Ryan, but definitely Kilkenny. Kilkenny have a great wee structure. If you Googled the Kilkenny skills test, there's they have a skills test for every age group going up. That's one of the ones we would be emphasising up here in Ulster anyway, and it's one of the ones we put it through in our vodcast as well about our skill assessment, as using it as an example. But there's plenty of good examples out there, Martin, so coaches shouldn't be having to go away and try and make stuff up themselves.
Kevin, thanks a million. Brian Ryan's one is to coach an app. It's a little bit elaborate in setting it up, but very easy to use. Folks, look at what Kevin has said there in particular about passing the information on from coach to coach. Now, we touched on something like that on the previous workshop on the club coach, and we said, you know, having a coaching coordinator, somebody that's pulling all the coaches together and passing on information. Because, look, let's be honest about it. It's It's not good enough that a child that has started hurling or camogie, let's say at 6 or 7 years of age, and by the time they get to 12, they're still not able to strike on the two sides. You know, that's not good enough, because that means the coaches are not watching that. So I would even say at adult level, there should be a skills test done every night with your eyes, that your coach is looking out at the players and watching and seeing how far they can strike. Can they do it on both sides? Can they catch? Are they dropping ball when they're raising them, etc. So, you know, what Kevin has said to you there is just so important. Now, you have to be careful that a player that finds the going tough, that you're cutting them slack and you're giving them the rewards and you're giving them the encouragement. But equally so, and it's not saying that you have to be hard on anybody, but the players that are not putting in the effort on their skill work, you can't be mollycoddling them either and being nice to them, especially if they're players that think they should be on the team. And I would have had that with a couple of young players over the years in school, and they're wondering why they're not on the school team, or one of their parents is wondering, and I say, well, sure, they're not on it because they're not playing well enough, and they're not playing well enough because they don't practice enough. And I'll say, look, there's Johnny and Peter and Jimmy, and they're out on the wall there every lunch break, and they're working. Whereas your lad, he won't go out. You wouldn't see him out in it once in a month. So, you know, if players want to progress, they have to work. It's as simple as that. And, you know, sport is great in so many ways, but we don't mollycoddle them too much. And one of the things, you know, you have to, the thing about sport is you'll always get somebody better than you, and you'll always get beaten. And there's learning in that. And I wouldn't ever be on to saying, oh, every match has to be a draw, or I wouldn't be on while we promoting the go games at the underage, we'll say from 11s now and everybody getting the game, etc. When they get a little bit older, and I'm saying around 11, 12, you're cutting into kind of making the school team. At that stage, they have to start learning, well, everybody is not going to be on the team, and it won't be picked every day. And I don't buy into telling everyone you can be whatever you want to be, because you can't. You know, I wanted a hurl senior for Kilkenny, but it didn't happen. And I tried, I'm still trying, and it's not going to happen. So you don't, you know, give youngsters false hope either. And equally so, I think sport teaches youngsters to be resilient and teaches them that life is not equal and life has plenty of knocks. And, you know, when you think you're good in hurling or camogie and suddenly you get hammered by 20 points, and the coach comes home and you don't start making excuses. Look, those guys were better, in the story. Kevin will be used to that up there now. I won't rattle the boat with him, but he has a few neighbouring clubs there. He'll be dishing out a few hammers from time to time. But, you know, sport can be good that way when handled properly, that there's life learning in it. And it can stand to players, it can stand to them in their life later on when they're doing their leaving cert and they all want to be flying airplanes or flying rockets, but they won't all be doing that. So you learn from sport that, look, we work for it, we try for it, we strive for it, but it doesn't mean we get it. And that's an important life learning. Now, this little one, again, is just saying the same thing. Everybody gets the same opportunity in the training field. The difference is what they do in their own time. Same in school. They all looking at the same blackboard. They all get the same chance in the classroom. The difference is the little bit you do at home, maybe. So working in their own time. And the top players in all sports, they work their socks off. Let nobody tell you any different. You know, people say these great players are born. Of course they're born. We're all born. But they become good and they become great. And I've seen so many of them because they put in more work than anybody else. Now, bearing in mind, if everybody puts in the same amount of work, everybody won't play for their county. If every athlete does the same amount of training, there's only one going to win the national 100-metre sprint. So you got to bear that in mind, and that is sport. This one, folks, is a little PDF that we have circulated. You probably all have it at this stage. I'll send it out again. It's full of resources, everything from skills and drills to written plans, you name it. They're all clickable. the blue text there with the arrow pointing in, they're all clickable, and they'll bring you onto a website, or they'll bring you somewhere where these resources are. On the right hand side there, down at the bottom, there's a green word called downloads. If you click in there, you can download some of these skills tests and posters and a few other little bits and pieces that you might find useful. So look at folks, we'll stop the share now, and Damien, Kevin will break in now, and there might be a question or two there. Damien, is there